advertising. So I have a couple of screens for you to just give you a little bit of background on what we offer here at the Evolutionary Astrology Network. We basically have 4 different ways that you can be a student. Many of you could be familiar with us already with our weekly podcast as Kim Marie here. I am Star Lady on my weekly podcast, and Leroy is Media Monk. So we have found that people have started to call us Star Lady and Media Monk in life as well. So our weekly podcasts are always found on our website. You see the URL down there at the bottom, and you go to the menu that says Forecast. It's a drop-down menu, and you can find our podcasts. We also have done something new. We have an Astro Library where we have taken all of our audio and video materials from the last 12, 13 years, I think, and we put them into 3 different sections of our Astro Library. I'll show you about that. And then many people choose to become a student. They either become a registered student and purchase one of our course segments, and some of them choose to go on and actually do homework with me and become certified. So here's just a quick snapshot of the Astro Library. Section 1 is archetypes, planets, houses, signs. Section 2 is understanding the EA method, meaning Pluto and the nodes, as we call it, the soul and its ego in EA. And then Section 3 is kind of everything else, relationship and family astrology, relocation, health and wellness. You can see from your screen how many titles and hours we have in each one of these sections. This Astro Library came across when our website decided to stop functioning last fall, and we had to reinvent ourselves on the web. And this has been one of our sweet surprises to recognize that we could package all our materials in such a way that everybody loves, that everybody can go and pursue at their own leisure month by month. You can, in any of these sections, you can choose to receive the materials for just 1 month, or you can choose to repeat month after month and then cancel a subscription when you're done with your studies in any various section. Did I have that right, Media Monk?
Yep. You're hitting on all the important points.
Okay. All right. And of course, one of our major things at Evolutionary Astrology Network is the course materials for those who want to study astrology.
Kim Marie, before you
yes?
enter the course materials, maybe there's one
yes?
thing I might add to the Astro Library sections that I recently upgraded. Not only are all the hours of the Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto audio workshops included in the planets and houses and signs section, I also put Pluto in section 3 and section 2 because it's such a core understanding the EA method. It's also a part of forecasting for sure, this Pluto and Capricorn. So just know that there's tons of other information. And by the way, we produced the first Astrology, Reincarnation, and Soul conference back 2010 live in Denver, Colorado. And I am just now completing uploading all of that information into the Astro Library. So lots of value there, and we appreciate your feedback as anyone chooses to join us as a student in that way.
So then, of course, the major thing that we have to offer is our Multimedia Course, and you can see the 3 segments on your screen. Each of these segments sell for $300 plus shipping. You see the binder you get, you see the DVDs. Each of them have, each segment has approximately 25 hours worth of DVDs for you to study at your own leisure. And of course, any course segment will get you access to our audio archives for registered students. I have just completed this month, September 2013, 10 years of teaching my monthly continuing ed classes to registered students, and so there's over 250 hours of archived audio information that you can download. You can burn CDs as a registered student. It's material that you have access to in multiple ways to allow you to study however is best for you. Now, I will tell you, one of the things that I'm getting ready to do is I'm getting ready to cross over and start teaching monthly classes on segment 2. on relationships, synastry and composite, both from an intimacy perspective and from a familial parent-child perspective. And as I cross over to start teaching monthly classes on segment 2, one of the things we plan to do is to switch over from audio to webinars. So classes just like this, when I get on and teach, you get to do it off of your computer and get a visual, because when you start looking at two charts, comparing them, creating a third composite chart, it can get quite complicated quite fast. And when you can have the visual in front of you, it can really be helpful for learning. So thank you for everyone for allowing me to do this housekeeping and show you what we offer at the Evolutionary Astrology Network. So my presentation this morning is to give you an overview on some of the aspects that we have going on. It was a couple of years ago when I was finishing up my deep memory processing training, and I was brainstorming with some students there about, oh my gosh, we're going to have Saturn going into Scorpio, and that North Node's going to be there. And lo and behold, when we looked, Venus was there. And so it was like, ooh, Pluto astrologers, you know, Scorpio, Pluto rules Scorpio. And so we got excited about that, and that was kind of the inspiration for me of wanting to do an event for this time period. So as I'm prepping my materials, what do? Many of us, when we put on events, we like to put out a chart. Let's see what the flavor is as we initiate this event. So as you can see in front of you now, I have a chart for this morning at 10 a.m. for my lecture as we started. And when I drew this up, I was like, oh my gosh, well, first of all, I like Pluto in the third house. That means we're going to have a lot of information we'll share as we're all reaching over to that ninth house polarity with Jupiter and understanding it, making sense of it all. You see a grand cross going on. I'll speak to that a little bit later in this presentation. But what hit me was, oh, 2 degrees Scorpio rising. Oh my gosh, that's my stellium. So I decided I decided what the heck. And I decided to put Kim Marie and Leroy's charts up. So now you're looking at a tri-wheel, as they call it. And that inner chart is the event chart for 10 o'clock this morning with that 2 degree Scorpio rising. And as you can see there's my stellium, Sun, Mercury, Neptune, between 1 and 2 degrees Scorpio. And oh, by the way, there's Leroy's Scorpio moon, in case you don't know that. And for those of you who've never seen our charts before, my moon at 23 Scorpio and Leroy's Saturn at 26 Scorpio. Now, some of your traditional astrology go, oh my gosh, a couple who has a moon-Saturn conjunction, very serious relationship. Well, put it in Scorpio, and what are we? Pluto astrologers. But the other things that I have found about that moon-Saturn conjunction is it can really bring a longevity. You know, it's my moon, it's Leroy Saturn. And one of the things that's happened to us, and I won't share too much of our little details, but as Saturn went into Scorpio last October, one of the things that happened was that we decided to change the conference from being a live event in Denver. I'm kind of thankful I'm not having to travel to Denver right now, and I am wishing everybody in that whole Colorado Front Range area all of the best in being able to be safe and have all of their property and possessions be as protected and safe as they can. I think there's a lot of climate change in front of us as a human species to recognize we do not have dominion over nature. We have to learn how to be with nature, in harmony with nature. So yeah, for both of us, for all of us, our love and prayers go out to all of you along that Colorado Front Range and New Jersey East Coast and anywhere on the planet in which we are having our feedback from Mother Nature.
Uranus and Aries weather changes.
Our Uranus and Aries weather changes, yes, Uranus-Pluto square. A little bit more on that later. So that stellium came across the beginning of last fall, or Saturn came up into Scorpio the beginning of last fall and went over my stellium. And the website decided it wanted to be reinvented. And what the other thing that happened, just for feedback, and as you're looking at all this Scorpio energy, Leroy has a 17-year-old son who has lived with us since he was 10. And at that same time period last fall, as we started organizing this event, going through the website, we lost our son's mother. She transitioned back into spirit world. And so Leroy and I had moved our son back down to Georgia. He was going to finish out the last 2 years of high school with his mother. We thought we were empty nested, and Saturn in
Saturn
Scorpio
moon.
and Saturn moon, all that stuff you're looking at that chart.
Full-time parenting.
Full-time parenting. That's it. So anyway, I just saw that on the ascendant of the chart for this event, and I thought, well, I'll share a few tidbits for any of you who are new to EAN and get curious about who are Star Lady and Media Monk. Well, we got a little bit of Scorpio in us. So here's some of the major transits we're going to have going on this week. It's not all of them, but this, of course, that Venus-Saturn North Node stellium was my inspiration for creating an event this week. And then we found out it was a full moon, and then we found out that Pluto was going stationary direct, and Saturn was making the last of its 3 waning sextiles to Pluto on the same day that it went direct. So while I am flashing through these slides, remember that you as attendees will have access to this as a permanent recording. So you can always go back and fast forward, reverse, I think pretty much, and find some of these dates and times and degrees as I move through these slides. So if I seem to be moving too fast for you, again, you can go back to the recording and get this information for yourself all over again. So as we start looking at these major aspects that are going on, first of all, I did a chart for when Venus and Saturn had their conjunction. Now, one of the things that I would like to say for you as you're looking at these charts, there are astrologers who will use the actual rising sign of a chart for their location. However, many of us are watching these presentations from all over the world, and one of the things that I started to do as a forecasting astrologer is use what we call 0 degrees Aries houses. And that means that all the planets are sitting in their natural houses. If you look at this, you will see that the ascendant is 0 Aries, 0 Taurus, 0 Gemini. What it does is it puts all of the planets in their signs in their natural houses. Now, if you are a beginning astrologer, this is a good way to study some of the mundane events because it can give you an easier way to grasp some of the natural archetypes before you have to combine the sign in a house. Now, a lot of your solar forecasting astrologers will take the sun. They'll put it on this first house and do the chart interpretations of where the planets fall in houses with sun in the first, then they'll put sun in the second. There's various ways that your solar forecasting astrologers who write a lot of the forecasts out there will play with this 0 degrees Aries chart. But I like to use this many times when I'm working with mundane examples. Now, of course, one of the first things that you want to remember to do this week, and one of the reasons why we have all of our presentations, at least in Mountain Time, going on during the day, is the evenings are beautiful at watching Venus right now. And so on Wednesday, September 18th, you can see Venus in the evening sky, and Saturn will be there with it. Venus will be too bright to see Saturn unless you've really got some good binoculars or telescopes. Maybe you might be able to see it, Saturn, before it sets. And I do want to point out that the North Node is always invisible. The North Node and the South Nodes are points in space. They're where the Moon crosses back and forth over the Sun's path, going north and south of the Sun's path. With that, so more on this stellium. I just wanted to show you the chart for when Venus and Saturn were making their conjunction. And of course, one of the things that are still within orb is this beautiful grand trine in water. Now, one of our presenters, Terry Lee, will speak to the grand trines in water and earth a little bit later this week for us. So, as we start to look at the stellium of Venus, Saturn, and the North Node hanging out together all of this week, what you want to notice is that Venus, which is the ruler of the South Node in Taurus, is conjunct the North Node. And when you have any ruler of the South Node conjunct the North Node, there is a push to move the past forward. There's a push to leave that past behind and really find that courage and that effort to go forward. And so whereas the South Node in Taurus can have many of us wanting to be secure, many of us sometimes wanting to stay in our pattern. Don't rock my boat. I have found my sense of who I am and how I'm secure here right now, and I don't want to move. Well, again, Venus in Scorpio is saying, guess what? If you're not willing to make the effort to find your courage, Scorpio, and move forward, we can create some cataclysms to help you do that. Scorpio, remember, ruled by Pluto, can bring across a lot of what we call those volcanoes and earthquakes and all of those major events inward and outward that just change the entire landscape. Venus has some of that energy in Scorpio as it goes across that North Node. Not only that, add in the fact that Pluto, as ruler of the North Node in Scorpio, is going direct this week. So it's finishing up its 5-month retrograde cycle, which started, hold on, I've got to get my little sheet out. The Pluto retrograde cycle started back April 12th of 2013. Pluto went retrograde at 11.5 degrees Capricorn. And so now here it is getting ready to go direct on September 20th at 9 degrees Capricorn. So Pluto, just Pluto going stationary direct is going to have a major effect on having all of us find that Scorpio willpower to move forward. And then adding to this picture is the fact that Saturn is making the conjunction to Venus as well. And Saturn is in a waning sextile. That's the 300-degree mark. And if you are rather new to the cycle of phases and aspects and how we look at aspects in evolutionary astrology, later this week we'll have Laura Nalbandian speaking to the 8th harmonic. And she will give us more information on how we look at the 8 phases and how we look at some of the aspects in evolutionary astrology. But a waning sextile means that Saturn has started at Pluto and has went 300 degrees around the chart. It is in a nice sextile aspect. It's also in what we would call the last quarter phase. And when you look at the last 90 degrees of the natural circle from 0 to 360, when you're looking at 270, the crises in consciousness all the way down to 360. This is where the soul is having to clean up its karma between any two planets. This is where it's having to surrender to everything that it has manifested and created, but it's been there, done that. It's losing its value. It's losing its sense of meaning. I've done this job so long, I can't do it anymore. I've been in this relationship so long, I've got to reinvent it, or there's nothing in there for me anymore. And so when we are looking at planets, at that waning sextile aspect, it is a good aspect for the most part. There's a ease of understanding. But sextiles are half a trine, and so there's also an ease to resist. Again, I'm comfortable here. I've got everything set up the way I like it. And when you're talking Saturn to Pluto, you know, I have the house, I have the car, I have all my structures, I have all my stuff, I have all my things. What do you mean I have to let them go? Just ask people in Colorado right now. They're going through it. And so The other thing, we'll speak to Michelle Davidson, who is in Colorado. She will speak to the mutual reception we have going on between Saturn and Pluto as well. Saturn in Scorpio, Pluto in Capricorn, they are in each other's signs of rulership. So that mutual reception makes them a little more of a powerhouse together. So even though it's a waning sextile aspect and there is a sense of ease, there are also some pretty heavy-duty powerhouses, and all of us with just this energy you're looking at on your screen will go through time periods where things turn topsy-turvy. It's time for change, and we have to figure out, how do I do that individually? What does that mean for me? How do I make these changes in my life that are showing up either pretty drastically inside my in front of my face, or they're more subtle ones that I'm just getting that little messaging, that little whisper that's starting to speak louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. All right, I'll do it, I'll make the effort. That's kind of that Saturn-Pluto energy that we have going on right now. So don't let the waning sextile fool you. So as we're moving along here, I wanted to speak a little bit about this nodal axis transit as well. We have the North Node in Scorpio, South Node Taurus, and you can see the dates that they are taking place, August 29th through February 22nd, 2012 through 2014. Mr. Leroy, I hear you typing away. I don't know if it will show up on the recording, but you might mute yourself for me. Thank you, honey. Now I don't hear that typing in the background, so thank you for those of you who are typing in questions. Leroy's always welcome to interrupt me if it's something that somebody would like to ask or interact with or have me addressed if I'm going too fast, missing over any details. Again, I'm doing overview because some of this stuff's going to be covered quite in depth later on this week. One of the things that is observed through evolutionary astrology is when you have the nodes of the moon. Again, north node is the north node of the moon. When the moon crosses that point, the sun's traveling and goes above it. South node is when the moon crosses that point of the ecliptic where the sun's traveling and goes below it. South node is always the past, the ego of the past, where we're comfortable, where we want to gravitate on an egoic level for security reasons. The north node is where the ego is striving to evolve and learn and grow and become something that it wasn't before. So when we are looking at the nodes transiting through signs of the zodiac, those signs appear to be lessons on the surface. They appear to be what's coming at us. But what's going on underneath is that the rulers of those signs the nodes are transiting through represent the actual lessons that we're having to learn on an egoic level. For instance, Scorpio, the ruler is Pluto. Taurus, the ruler is Venus. So the real deep lessons through the nodal axis transit in Scorpio Taurus is Venus and Pluto. And what do they represent on a planetary pair, as a planetary pair? They represent self-reliance on the deepest soul levels. So if you're looking at your own chart, go to see where natal Venus is, by sign, by house, by aspect. This is where you can feel that your security is being pulled out from underneath you.
Kim Marie,
go ahead.
at that point, I did want to interrupt you because we did have a question from Daniel who's asking if transiting south node is conjunct natal north node or vice versa. Is that a similar effect of having the nodal rulers conjunct the other node?
Yes, it is. Yes, it can be. And when you have a nodal opposition, as we call it, the transiting north nodes on your south node, transiting south node on your north node, that is a nodal opposition. And what it brings you is an opportunity to really see a larger picture, to see both sides, to step back and find a deeper, broader level of objectivity. Because the opposition aspect, the 180, the halfway around the circle, the opposition aspect is about the ability to look at things from a broader perspective and throw off what's no longer working from the first half of the circle. And it's about throwing off self so that you can then move into the second half of the circle and go into relationships as a more equal partner participating in whatever the particular relationship details are. So if you want to make that 180 aspect generic, again, it's about objectivity, and it's about throwing off something from the past that's not working. Now you bring that into the nodal axis, making an opposition to itself. It gives the north node the ability to look at the past, that south node, and go, boy, you're still clinging to this stuff here. Can we let go of some of that old emotional garbage you're carrying around? And the south node is on the natal north node, so to speak. This is my example that I'm using. And so that transiting south node really has some energy to move itself forward, to reinvent itself, it can take, again, past and future, and decide how from both of those polarities, how does that natal north node really want to move forward? Because wherever our natal north node is in our chart, by house sign aspect, it's where our ego, where our emotional body is striving to evolve towards in any lifetime. So, little tidbit for you there.
Do you happen to have a chart example about how that would work?
Not on the opposition, no.
Okay, how about an example of how to pull in those natural rulers of the nodes and kind of blend them into where the transiting nodes are now?
I will show that generically, okay? Let's go back to this right here.
That question came from Robin. Thank you, Robin.
Sure, you bet. Let's go back right here as we're looking at the stellium chart, and I can show you just example from this chart. You see this south node ruler is Taurus. Okay, here's second house. Here's where we're going to have all of the security issues, all right? But the deeper issue going on is actually Venus. And it is Venus in Selfreliance. And right now, with Venus in Scorpio, Venus is asking us to really find the courage, Scorpio, find the willpower, Scorpio, to deeply look at our fears. Scorpio is very psychological, so we want to look at some of those deepest fears that we have and where are those fears coming from, to turn all of that psychological Scorpio energy of Venus in Scorpio inward upon ourselves in order to understand why we operate as we operate on I need my security basis. Again, I'm showing you this very on a mundane level, which means that this is happening for all of us. This is not a natal chart example. This is what's happening for all of us right now on planet Earth on some level. But you can go back to your own chart. Where is your natal Venus at? By house, by sign, by aspect. That's where your natal Venus is what's being triggered right now in searching for security, in feeling the rug ripped out underneath you, in having to find a deeper level of self-reliance. Now, North Node transiting through Scorpio, you can relate to the things that I said with Venus in Scorpio. We're having to find that self-empowerment to go forward out there into the world with others in ways that we haven't done before. But the real issue under the surface is going to be its ruler, Pluto. If I use this mundane example, the chart in the skies this week, Pluto's in Capricorn, and it's just finishing up its retrograde cycle, getting ready to go direct. And so the deeper issue that's going on here for Pluto is, well, I've still got to be secure, and I've got to be in charge, And I've got to feel that I am moving forward with my career. I've got to feel that my position out there in the world is secure in some way. All of the Capricorn things that Pluto is going through is what will be the deeper issues of this nodal axis transit in Scorpio Taurus. There's going to be a flavor to this again for all of this because this is how it's operating in the sky right now. And Pluto getting ready to go stationary direct again is challenging all of us to let go of the past on a desired nature and to move forward. Now, with this nodal transit in your own charts, you'd be looking for your natal Pluto. Natal Pluto by sign, by house, by aspect. You can look at the phasal relationship or the aspect between your natal Pluto Venus, and those would be the core lessons that you're going through with the nodal axis transit, North Node Scorpio, South Node Taurus. And so for each of us, we're going to have Venus and Pluto in different signs, different houses, different aspects. So we're all going to have our own flavor of where we're having to find self-reliance on a deeper soul level. Where we're going to have to find, when you're looking at Venus, Pluto, and how they naturally rule that Taurus-Scorpio axis, there's going to, it will always bring up the whole issue of survival. It will bring up being able to do it ourselves, but it's lonely doing it ourselves. So how do we learn how to merge with another in order, that old saying, we're all in it better together, we all play in the same sandbox. When we recognize community, when we merge with another, it reminds me of the old Jesus saying, wherever two or more are gathered, there's a bigger energy. And that's what we're all trying to reach for with these Pluto Venus signatures in our own charts.
We're all better with the blending.
We're all better with the blending.
We can be, if you can get by the original triggers to the blending, I guess.
If you can get by the original triggers and the original fears. Which, one of the other things that I wanted to point out is all through the month of September, Mars is squaring the nodal axis. We have Mars in Leo, halfway between the North Node, South Node. And so, Mars in Leo is, here I am, notice me, you like my hair, do you want to come play with me? Mars in Leo wants center stage. And so for some of our speakers, one of the things we wanted to do at EAN with this webinar is to bring out some new emerging evolutionary astrologers. So we will have some speakers speaking for the first time on a webinar. And so Mars in Leo, sometimes what's underneath that is like, well, it was a lot of bravado, but I'm really a little insecure underneath the surface right now. And so that can be going on when Mars is square the nodes. And one of the most basic things about Mars square the nodes is right action, so to speak. What does my soul really want to do right now? Do I want to run back to that South Node where my fears are? Or am I going to go towards that North Node in Scorpio and find my courage? Now, another way that we can see this, a more mundane example, is any of you who are following the news and, President Obama was going to bomb Syria because of the chemical weapons, and the public doesn't want it, the public's war weary, Congress doesn't want it, Republicans will oppose whatever a Democratic president says, vice versa. Isn't it funny to see Republicans now opposing war? But what also is going on out there on that more international stage is all of these different countries coming out with their Mars and Leo. Who gets the power? Power grabs going on right now, and also some negotiations going on as well. It's not all a bad thing. Stay tuned. I'll be doing 2 lectures with Robert Gover on real money, and we'll talk more about the country of Russia and what we call the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa. There's a big energy building up as power plays of the United States not being able to be the top dog so much anymore and having kind of come into equality with other countries. Stay tuned. That story hasn't been written yet. We'll watch that one unfold throughout the rest of this decade. But my point was in just giving some examples with Mars square the nodes. All of us, again, on a personal, individual level, are battling back and forth between our insecurities and our courage, Taurus, Scorpio. And then we also see this happening on a more mundane level between countries as well. All right, as I'm watching my time, I'm going pretty good with time in the things that I want to cover. And so as more questions come up, Leroy, it's fine for any questions. Anybody who's listening, if you're wanting to ask.
Sure. I guess I just had one question for you too, Kim. So, all of this is, of course, based upon our core understanding of evolutionary states in evolutionary astrology. So let's say we're dealing with consensus versus individuated and or spirituated. Would that denote that maybe the Scorpio Taurus energy will just reveal blind spots for consensus reality folks that they're maybe not working on consciously? Is that the difference in how it would apply to the different evolutionary states?
Yes, and what we have going on, and just quickly for anybody who's new, evolutionary astrology is based on observation correlation, and we can observe that not all souls are in the same state of awareness or consciousness. And so we have three major methods. There's a fourth one. We won't work with that one today. We usually work with the three major ones, which we call consensus, individuated, and spirituated. I'm going to drink some water, everybody. Excuse me.
The dimly evolved state would probably not be showing up on a call like this. So
dimly evolved, de-evolved is 2-3% of souls on the planet. Either just coming onto planet Earth from other places, other consciousness, animal, or they are de-evolved and they're back. They've been constricted some way as karmic retribution. We always say think of a Hitler. Consensus, though, is about 7 out of 10 people on the planet. They consent, cowbells around their neck. I'm trying to talk too fast. They can't step outside the space-time they were born into. This is where organized religion exists. They believe whatever they're told. Individuating is about 2 out of 10, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They're trying to step away from consensus and say, I am different, and who am I in my difference? And then spirituated, which are more or less 1 out of 10 people on the planet. And these evolutionary states are not better than, less than, and they're not static. They ebb and flow over large periods of time. The spirituated state are those who are learning to understand universal timeless laws and principles which are always observable in nature. And so they can separate themselves away from the context of the times that they live in. And so your consensus souls will look at that South Node Taurus, North Node Scorpio, and it's going to be hard to get away from the fear. We're all going to have some level of fear on every evolutionary state. Doesn't matter how evolved you are, you can still feel fear, especially when you have one of Mother Nature's events coming at you. But the consensus will be much more in touch with the fear. It will be harder for consensus to get away from the fear. I've got to get my money out of the stock market and I got to put it in gold underneath my mattress. I've got to, hold on to all of my stuff. I can't share it with anybody else because there's not enough to go around. They'll go into the South Node Taurian hoarding. And what happens is evolution takes place all over the planet, no matter what evolutionary state you are. But it has a tendency to operate, for the most part, pretty slow, or what we call Darwinian uniform. And then every so often we have the cataclysmic changes where evolving forces overcome resisting forces, and we have the volcano, we have the earthquake, inner, outer, and the landscape changes, and we are forced to change. Consensus has a tendency to move very, very slowly. We all do. And when it has the volcano and the eruption, sometimes there's a step forward, but sometimes it's back to the past again. And that's what's going to be happening with this nodal axis in Scorpio Taurus, because we're talking fixed water and fixed earth. I like my stuff. My emotions, even if they're dysfunctional in some way, give me a sense of security. And so that consensus, again, can get fairly caught up in wanting to remain with South Node Taurus stability. And so then their natal Venuses by signs and houses, keep that circular energy going with whatever their thing is. The partner always leaves me, or something like that they'll be going through. When we look at individuated states of souls moving with this nodal axis transit, North Node Scorpio, South Node Taurus, these are souls that really then turn that psychological eye back on where their fears are. Then they feel the fear, but then that North Node Scorpio and their Pluto goes, why do I feel this fear? What created this fear? How can I look at it? How can I address this? What can I learn from it? How do I change it, Pluto? How do I move beyond my fears? And so then they metamorphose that South Node in Taurus into deeper levels of inner security rather than all the stuff. And the spirituated states do that individuated thing on an even finer level. They're the ones that realize you could take away every single physical possession and they'd be okay. They could create it again if it was what their soul needed to do. Or they could let it go if it was time to let it go. That they recognize that consensus operates from the ego. Individuating states are going back and forth between the ego and the soul. Spirituated is learning to recognize that soul. And for all of us, the soul, the immutable part of ourself that lives life after life after life, that operates pretty unconsciously. And it's time periods like when Pluto goes direct this week and makes such a shift in changing directions from our Earth-centered, geocentric viewpoint that we tap into the soul. It can pop up to the surface for a moment. Whoa, okay, I get it. But for most of us, the soul operates on such a deep unconscious level that we know it through ego. That's why your most evolved souls will incarnate with an ego, and we know the ego through the moon and its nodes. And by the way, I have some slides here towards the end of this presentation. I have some slides reviewing the soul and its ego, and I have an expansion, I have an expansion of some of the things that Jeffrey Wolf Green taught in his original teachings. Some things that I've just kind of pondered on for a while, and it just seemed to naturally fit. So as we move on, I'll share that information with you. For beginners, I'll go in just a review of the soul and its ego with Pluto and the nodes.
Kim?
Those of you who have been studying EA, yep.
I just want to know if you want to take a little breather here now at the 45-minute
Sure.
mark, and I can launch a poll for our Astro listeners out there.
All right, sure.
Let's
Leroy did the poll. What are we going to ask?
Well, let's have everybody respond to this. You can see you have 4 choices below. How many webinars have you attended this year in this way on any subject? This is kind of obviously it's not astrology related, but it is technology related. So thank you for responding. We'll just give about 30 seconds or a minute for everybody to select. About half of you have voted so far. Everybody's chiming in, so we're up to 3 out of 4 have voted. And yeah, well, let's see, there's a few people that are. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. There's 81%. Maybe a few more people are back at their computer now. So how many webinars have you attended this year? You know, we are excited about this as being a new possibility to connect with our student base and our colleagues across the planet. So I'm going to close the poll up and let's share the results. Can everybody see that okay? It looks like, wow, we have 10%, 9% of the people have been on 10 webinars. So that's kind of interesting. You know, half the people, a couple, maybe 3 or 4, and a third of the people have their first webinar experience with Astrology, Reincarnation, and Soul 2013. So that's good. All right, so I'll hide those results.
I've noticed over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 months that the astrological community seems to be jumping on this webinar bandwagon. I've noticed some astrologers doing individual classes. I've noticed a few workshops showing up. And of course, we're not the first ones to do a webinar like this. I think there was one 2, 3 years ago. But even the major organizations, ESAR, NCGR, they're starting to do some webinars as well. So we feel this is probably going to be the next step, where we've all done audio conference calls. Anybody remember when audio conference calls came out? And we started in with those. Now here's the next step, doing the webinars.
So thank you everybody for participating in the poll, and we'll try to have one of those for every event as we move forward through the week.
Thank you, Leroy. So, you know, again, evolutionary astrology, for anybody who's a beginner, we work with these different evolutionary states of consciousness, and they are not discernible by a chart. You must observe and correlate. You must actually interact with the other soul to observe and correlate where they are at in consciousness. And I usually tell EA students, go to the grocery stores, go to the post office. That can be where you can run into a variety of the different evolutionary states of the soul and your interaction. Or study your own family. Almost all of us in our own families will have consensus individuated and spirituated state souls all learning how to operate together. And of course the joke is, if you're individuating, moving into spirituating, you're usually the black sheep of the family. So as you can see from the screen in front of you again right now, as we're looking at this Venus, Saturn, and North Node stellium, it kind of bullet pointed for you some of the things that are really going on for all of us right now in this month of September as we're moving into the fall time period. Obviously, we have Saturn in Scorpio for another 1.5 years yet. We have the North Node in Scorpio till February. They're going to be within this orb throughout this month of September for another few weeks, at least the rest of September. So for all of us, we find that we have a deep psychological probing going on within ourselves. Why am I made the way I am? Why is this the point where my soul is at this point in my life? Why are these the circumstances that I find myself in? I'm married, I'm getting a divorce, I'm single, I have a job, I don't have a job. Why do I have these particular circumstances in my life? And when we turn that Scorpio energy inward like this and ask those famous why questions, it starts to give us information on the nature of our soul's desires. And of course, Pluto going stationary direct this week. We're all wanting to evolve our desires. We're recognizing old desires to let go of. And we're finding an ability to move forward. We're finding new desires coming out, coming to the surface for ourselves. well, I finally do want to get my certification with evolutionary astrology, or I do want to take that vacation, or I do want to take that class. Again, the separating evolutionary astrology looks at our dual desire nature, separate and return. And every desire we have is of a separating nature that is exhausted. That's natural law. The last desire that we exhaust is usually the sexual. Returning desire is to no source. So all of us, as we do this deep psychological probing, may find on some level that we're wanting to know source better. We're wanting to take some step to practice our beliefs in some way, or to merge with another on some deeply spiritual way. We're all getting the twinges, so to speak, Pluto direct, of how do I take my next baby step forward, knowing source energy. That's part of this picture. That's the last of these bullet points that we're looking at. So you can see that this stellium is really having us look at how we're made up on deep inner levels. It's asking us to look at our self-reliance on the deepest levels possible. Self-reliance for Venus, the Taurus side of Venus, is all 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. With Venus in Scorpio and Venus-Pluto as a planetary pair with this nodal transit, it really is pushing our emotional self-reliance buttons. Who will love me? There isn't a one of us who isn't getting triggered in or out of relationships from time to time of feeling alone. No one loves me, or whoever I'm with doesn't love me. We can all get that trigger that then has us going inward to say, well, how do I love myself better? And sometimes it can happen in that very Plutonian fashion. Sometimes it can just be revealed on a very subtle level, but the light bulb goes off and, oh, I've heard that gazillion times, and now I'm getting, this is really what I do have to do to love myself better. Maybe it's something with diet, exercise, and rest. Maybe it's something with being more gentle with yourself and not being such a workaholic, Pluto direct in Capricorn. So we're all having to reach for deeper levels of inner security, inner emotional self-reliance, that then allows us through the course of this fall, winter, into next year, to move ourselves forward in ways that we haven't done before, or ways that we've tried before but maybe weren't successful, but it's like coming to the surface again, and I do want to stretch myself in this new direction. For many of you on this call, if you are a student of evolutionary astrology, if you're a practicing evolutionary astrologer, this webinar throughout its whole series could spark new ways of how you want to come out as a teacher. There's a little tidbit for you guys. There is a website called join.me or joinme.net. Go Google search it. And if you you can do web screen sharing for up to 10 people, free. You want to do it on the nature we're doing, there's a little bit of money involved. But for all of you, and my point is you might be sparked in finding your courage to step out there and teach, to step out there and do something you haven't done before. Again, look where that stellium is in your natal chart by house. And that's that area of your life where you're going to be having to find your courage, where you're going to have to reach out and interact with others in ways you haven't done before, and see how you can evolve, see how you can grow. And from that effort, what you're going to do is metamorphose that South Node in Taurus. You're going to metamorphose that ruler Venus, and you're going to find more and more self-empowerment. You know, the distortions of Scorpio are power over. The healthy Scorpio is power with, stronger together. And so we're each going to have our areas where we're going to do that. If the stellium's in your 5th house, you may be having to do it with your creativity in new ways. There may be something that you need to metamorphose with your kids. If you've got some kids in your life, you got to have there may be some reunion that needs to come about, and some emotional catharsis of everybody being able to feel heard and express themselves emotionally. And one of the things about Pluto Scorpio in the 8th house is that after the earthquake and the volcano, when everything kind of filters down into a new landscape, there's usually a new level of emotional peace. It's coming from that deeper level of emotional self-reliance, but all of a sudden we can feel emotionally safe again. We want to be striving for that with this stellium that we have taking place. The other thing, I have 2 more things I want to cover in these last 30, 40 minutes. I won't take too long on this, but I just want to give you little tidbits on it. Again, you see that I still do this 0 degrees Aries rising. You see the full moon of Pisces. The mantra for, the evolutionary astrology mantra for Virgo is, I discern with intuitive wholeness. I discern with intuitive wholeness. The evolutionary astrology mantra for Pisces, flip it around. I'm in wholeness with my reality. I am in wholeness with my reality. WHOLENESS. So the full moon of Pisces is finding emotional peace. Being able to feel one with the universe in spite of all its Virgonian imperfections. Being able to feel, again, a sense of emotional well-being no matter what's going on. And so as we look at this full moon, all of you will want to be discerning where this is needing to take place in your own life. Sun in Virgo, again, it's a solar month where we can be very inwardly, outwardly critical. And we need to switch that over to inward, outward loving. Inner self-loving and outer self-loving, no matter what is taking place in the universe. Now, just briefly, I'm going to move forward from this, more on this chart you're looking at when we get to this last section. I just wanted to give you some tidbits on the eclipses that are coming up. We always have 2 eclipse seasons annually. We have a North Node eclipse season, South Node eclipse season. The North Node eclipse season takes place whenever the Sun is conjunct the North Node, and that's what we're moving into with our eclipses that are coming up in the next couple of months. And the North Node eclipse season is always about finding our emotional courage to move forward. And of course, the eclipses want to undermine that. South Node eclipse season is where we are always needing to make peace with our past in order to heal, especially on emotional levels. And so we alternate back and forth 6 months apart, and it slowly moves backwards in the zodiac, our eclipse seasons. The mean motion of the moon's nodes, North Node, South Node, go backwards through the zodiac. So the eclipses move backwards. And by the way, we will have the nodal axis transit that's going to be coming up in Libra Aries. We have Ginny Rodrigo. She's going to be one of our presenters speaking upon that nodal axis transit later on this week for you as well. Now, one of the things that I did put down at the bottom of this slide is I just wanted to familiarize people with the fact that in the world of evolutionary astrology, we look at Uranus as transformation. We look at Neptune as transcending. And we look at Pluto as metamorphosing. And so those three outer planets are always operating on an unconscious level within the soul, and we get little tidbits of them from time to time. Uranus is the individuated unconsciousness. And by the way, we'll have Mark Jones speak to the Uranus-Pluto squares this week as well, and he'll speak in more detail with this a little bit. But if you can remember those key words with those three outer planets, that can be very helpful for you. And you can ask yourself some questions as we go through these eclipses. What is it I need to transform? What is it I need to transcend, move beyond, move through? What do I need to metamorphose? Good old Pluto, death and rebirth. And as you can see, the transformations of Uranus are not, it can feel as upsetting, but one of the things that will happen many times with Uranus, we can look backwards on it and say, I noticed that was coming and I just wasn't paying attention. Pluto is the one that will come and surprise us more often and take that rug right out from underneath you, pull you right off from your feet with that. But these are keywords for these eclipse seasons. South node, it's time to heal the past. North node, it's time to move forward. So as we move into our eclipse season this fall, we're going to start out with a lunar eclipse at 26 degrees, Sun Libra, Moon Aries. You can see your dates there on the screen for that. A lunar eclipse is always a full moon. So I'm fond of saying that I like it when we have a lunar eclipse first, followed by a solar eclipse. Because the lunar eclipse, that full moon, it brings everything up to the surface emotionally. Eclipses are always about the planetary pair between the sun and the moon, between that conscious creative part of ourself and that lunar emotional part of ourself. And eclipses tend to bring issues to a head. Whatever's been floating around out there all of a sudden becomes in our face. And so we have, and our eclipses will go on either side of wherever the nodal transit is at. So again, for this Libra Aries lunar eclipse coming up, you'll get a lot of information from Jenny's lecture on just what the archetypes of Libra and Aries are. But it's going to be, are we going to draw those lines in the sand? You know, that's Libra Aries. They're either going to learn how to play in the same sandbox, or they're going to be polar opposites from some way. Stay tuned with eclipse seasons coming shortly, that we might notice a lot of stuff going on out there on the international scene. And to me, as I look at it, again, with these Uranus-Pluto squares and the grand crosses we have going on, it's when are we going to get to this? We're at choice points. That's the other thing with that Venus, Saturn, North Node, stellium, and Scorpio. Choice points, choice points. You hear a lot of astrologers saying this. Am I going to go this way or am I going to go that way? In evolutionary astrology's perspective, am I going to go with the separating forces, returning forces? And what blend thereof? Separating desires, returning desires. But it's like the whole world's a stage, and we're getting to this point of how much more war are we going to do before we recognize it doesn't get us anywhere. There's not enough war to create peace. We have to turn around and look at peace. That's what I see going on with some of this eclipse energy on a mundane level. Personally, we're on a 5-year cycle with Saturn in Libra and Saturn in Scorpio of everybody changing relationships on an intimate level. Be it the gender issues that we see going on for on a broader scale, on a more personal scale, all of us getting an evolution of what our values are on intimacy and relationships. So when a lunar eclipse comes first and everything comes to the surface on emotional levels, and then we follow with the solar eclipse, which is the new moon. Again, that can the new moons, we all know, new beginnings. Well, here's a solar eclipse following the lunar on a north node eclipse season. So there's more energy to just really pushes to that point, urges to that point of really making some major changes in our lives on how we choose to go forward on an individual soul basis. So you can all look and see where these degrees are falling in your own personal charts. And these are going to be some of the directions in which you are going to be choosing to go forward with this stellium, with these eclipses as they come along over the next few months. Now, the last thing that I wanted to speak about, and I'll check my time so I can see that we've got, well, we're doing okay here. I've got a little more time. Of course, Pluto stationary direct. It goes direct Friday the 20th at 9:27 a.m. Mountain Time. And throughout the course of this week of lectures, we will have Mercury in Libra within orb of the Grand Cross. And as we get to Friday, we'll see that full moon has moved on, and the moon is going to join Uranus in Aries. And so we might see some feisty energy going on as we get to the end of the week. And by the time we get to next Monday, the following Monday, Monday the 23rd, Leroy and Kimmery will be acting out this Grand Cross. You won't see us though. We'll be through with we'll be through with our 18 lectures, 20 lectures, whatever our count is, and we'll be acting this out in the hills.
Oh yeah,
the Black Hills of South Dakota.
You better clarify that a little bit for our Astro listeners.
Oh, I'm going to leave them in Pluto direct suspense, honey. We'll be climbing a mountaintop. We've already put a couple of hikes into play here of some places in the Black Hills where we have not been before. And we put so much energy into prepping for these webinars that we said, well, let's make ourselves, you know, let's make a hiking goal for when we're all done and we get to the little pat ourselves on the back and we're all done energy.
So we'll send some photos from the mountaintop when we arrive next week.
Yeah. Join us on Facebook if you haven't liked EAN yet, and we'll send you some photos of that. But you know, this is a pretty potent Pluto stationary direct as we see going on, and it's hard for me to look at this chart without seeing it on a mundane level. You know, Pluto and Cap, I want to go forward with my new inner authority. I want to go forward with my new levels of feeling in charge of my life and these new desires that are sparking within my soul. Jupiter over there in the opposite in Cancer, and I want to have a new level of inner security within my soul at the same time. And so I also, hold on, I pushed a couple buttons. So there's that back and forthness with Pluto direct and the Jupiter opposition between feeling our inner empowerment and feeling inwardly secure. And of course, we're moving towards Jupiter's retrograde cycle in Cancer, and there may still be some layers of inner security that we're going to address throughout the course of this winter. But our soul has come through a 5-month cycle of going inward and looking at old realities that no longer work, and then discerning what are the new realities in front of me. How do I make peace with that reality? Jupiter Cancer, emotional peace. And then how do I change it? How do I move forward with it? This is a Grand Cross in cardinal energy. Cardinal energy is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There isn't a one of us on the planet who isn't feeling insecure and who isn't being asked to do it differently than we've done it before, and to find that courage. And that's a lot of what Pluto direct is going to give us. Now, the Mercury Uranus moon oppositions, it's bringing up a lot of communications, a lot of new ideas. And so are the ideas bursting forth and they're coming through so fast that we can't keep up with it? It's like you guys trying to write everything down as you're listening to me. And remember, you have the recording. You can go back to it. or we are, drawing lines in the sand. I can't hear Mercury in Libra. I can't hear what the other person's saying because I'm too triggered. So can you take a breath? Can you calm yourself down? Can you listen to what the other person is saying? As you're looking at that Grand Cross, what we still have going on here, you can see that Jupiter's getting ready to enter or move into the first of three waxing sesquisquadrates with Neptune. Again, Laura Nalbandian will speak on the square and a half aspects. But you still have the grand trine energy going on, this water trine, in the midst of this grand cross. And so altogether, it's about continuing to find emotional peace, regardless of the reality that is in front of us. Take it to an extreme. We have somebody on the Front Range of Colorado, and they just watched their home get swept downstream. They lost absolutely everything, but they still have their pet. They still have their puppy. They still have their loved one. They still are reaching for, I'm alive, I made it through. Now that's a pretty extreme example, but we'll all have those kinds of examples going on. Looking at all of this on a mundane level, as we're looking at that international scene with all the different countries, what we can find here, Jupiter and Cancer will always bring up nationalism. And we'll have countries getting very, with this grand trine, we can have countries getting emotionally defensive of themselves as the Grand Cross is bringing up all the chaos, and we can't do things the way we used to do it anymore. I look at what's happening on this national scene with President Obama and President Putin and all of these other countries, and everybody's starting, everything's up in the air, everything's different. We have various people wanting to say he has too much backbone, he doesn't have enough backbone, and blah, 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 blah. But step back and look at the fact that we are learning how to negotiate with the Middle East, recognizing we can't bomb them anymore all the time. So I see some of that stuff that's going on an international level as being more, as being little tidbits of perhaps good news, negotiation versus bombs, hopefully. Yeah, here we go. I knew I had one more little bullet point sheet for you. So when Pluto is transiting through Capricorn, it's about the soul, Pluto, and how it structures its consciousness. And for all of us, that 15-year cycle of Pluto in Capricorn, 2008 through 2023-24, is about all of us letting go of old structures within our soul and moving forward and creating new ones. And one of the things that Jeffrey Greenwood used to say is it's almost like when Pluto's in Capricorn, you got to have one foot on the side of the fence that's the past, because it's created the structure that sustained you up until this point, pays the rent, is the job you have, but you also have to have another foot on the other side of the fence moving forward into the new. And so you've got to maintain the past and the future, that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of at the same time. Now, again, when Pluto goes direct, there is an energy. When it changes direction, there's a push of energy to just let go of the things in our life that are no longer working, no longer relevant, the things that we cannot make last anymore, the crystallizations, Capricorn, that just crumble away. And of course, when we're dealing with Capricorn and we're dealing with that Grand Cross that I showed you a moment ago, we're going to have all of the gender issues. Cancer Capricorn is gender issues. You see that in the news here this year. We're going to have parental, children, of course, work, home, family, and society itself. So there's a whole bunch of old ways of doing things. Again, the example I gave on Mundane international level is when we're going to recognize that we can't bomb everybody off the planet. And at the same time, as we're having this recognition of the old to release, we also have clarity on how we want to move forward. Or we want to restructure things in our life. New directions we want to go with, again, those same issues we were talking about. And Pluto, stationary direct in Capricorn, also gives us a new energy for self-discipline, for self-responsibility, all the Capricorn words, that energy to move forward. So look at, review, the Venus, Saturn, North Node stellium in Scorpio, a North Node nodal eclipse season, and Pluto stationary direct. 3 different big planetary energies that say, move forward. Go for it. Take the risk. As you feel, Pluto the soul works on emotional levels. As you feel that energy build up on an emotional level, how are you going to choose to put that into action? Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So how is your soul choosing to act, to move forward with new levels of self-empowerment, new levels of emotional courage? Go for it. May you be successful. For us, it's doing these webinars on a new level. We had no idea Colorado would be going through what it's going through right now, and Roy and I are giving sighs of relief. We're not trying to organize a conference on the Front Range when so much is going on there right now. And again, my thoughts, prayers, hearts go out to everybody in that direction. And may they be safe.
Oh.
Now, if there aren't any questions from the audience, I did want to put these screens up. I thought in case we had new people who are not familiar with Pluto, representative of the soul and how we look at the soul and its ego. These are the original teachings of Jeffrey Wolf Green. And if you want to, you go to the 4th point. We're very familiar with looking at natal Pluto by sign, generation we were born into, natal Pluto by house, our individual soul, and where it's coming from, where it gravitates to. Then we look at the South Node natally by house sign aspects, and this will tell us the ego from the past, and the ego that the soul operated through, and the ego that the soul looks for security reasons. And then what I've expanded upon for everybody is when I look at the planetary ruler of the South Node, I don't look at the ruler just by sign. I look at the ruler by house. I look at that ruler by sign and by house. Now, I'm going to skip over to a chart. Again, you'll have this recording. You can come back to this. This is material from Jeffrey Green's book, Pluto Volume 1, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. What I've added on is, again, this 4th point, natal planetary ruler by house. It's just as much information as the South Node planetary ruler by sign. I'm going to do the same thing with the evolutionary intent, and then I do have a chart to show you as an example for this. And so, the karmic dynamic is where the soul is coming from. The evolutionary intent is where the soul is intending to evolve in any lifetime. There's a few variables to this. I'll refer you to the Pluto Volume 1 book or to our course materials if you want more information. But when we look at the Trinity of the future, we're looking at the polarity point of natal Pluto by sign, generational lessons. The polarity point by house is your own soul's evolutionary intent and desire to evolve in this lifetime. Then you look at that North Node, where the ego is striving to evolve. in this life. And then again, what I've added on is this fourth point here. When you look at the planetary ruler of the North Node, you look at it by the sign and by the house. Both are just as valid. So, for sake of time, just write down those bullet points. You can fill it in later. So then what I wanted to give you as an example, I put out a Hollywood chart because these are charts where we know most of the background. They're in the news enough so we can save a little bit of time. We have a 9th house Pluto. It is in Virgo. So Brad Pitt is part of the Pluto and Virgo generation. Part of the Pluto and Virgo generation. That left brain analytical, health conscious generation, the computer generation, you know, the my soul operates by its left brain Virgo. My soul operates by trying to analyze and look at everything. The generational lesson, Pisces polarity point, is recognizing the whole is greater than the parts that make it up. Can't dissect it enough to come up with wholeness. It's just like we can't dissect the brain enough to find out where's the soul. It is recognizing, again, inductive logic, Pisces, versus deductive logic. Brad Pitt's in 9th house Pluto. This is the Sag house. So he is a Sagittarius soul from our EA language. He is a philosopher. He looks at a larger picture. It kind of counterbalances a lot of that Pluto-Virgo energy. And he's a worldwide traveler in his occupation. His lessons are recognizing that 3rd house polarity, the relativity of truth, that there's many paths home, that there is multiple ways of looking at things. By the way, for anybody who's curious, Angelina Jolie is a 3rd house Pluto. They have opposite Plutos that hold opposites attract energy. But my point that I wanted to make is here's the ego, the South Node, the ego of the past, North Node, ego of the future. So when you go to look at that South Node by its planetary ruler, you not only look at the fact that we have the South Node in Capricorn, so you'll look to Saturn, all right, to see what's going on with Saturn, but you also have that South Node in the 1st house. So the ruler of the 1st house is Mars. So you would, my mouse keeps disappearing on me, everybody. I'm sorry to squiggle it so much. But you look by that South Node ruler by house, which is Mars, which is conjunct that South Node. So when you're looking at the South Node planetary ruler, you would look at both Saturn and Mars for more information about the ego of the soul from its past. Now, in the same respect, when you're looking at the North Node, how his ego is trying to move forward into the future, you look at that South or North Node by sign, which is Cancer. So you'd go to look to the moon. You would also look to the ruler of the North Node by house, which in the 7th house, ruled by Venus, is Venus. So you'd look to 2 planetary rulers for the North Node to really complete the information on how the soul's ego is striving to evolve into the future. So look at a 3rd house polarity point. 3rd house polarity point with the North Node in Cancer. And those rulers, Moon and Venus, I mean, you start looking at this chart, and what starts coming to me all the time is this is a man who wants a big family. All that Cancer, Capricorn, and look at those nodes in there. And for those of you who are not familiar with this information, I think Jennifer Aniston was always delaying having a baby, and Brad Pitt wanted to have kids. He wanted a dozen kids, and I think they stopped at 6 or 7. I don't know for sure quite how many they have right now, but you can start to see a bunch of different information that can come through this chart. I don't have time to do a full in-depth interpretation on this chart. What I wanted to point out again, is when you're looking at the planetary rulers of the nodes, both South Node and North Node. You look at the planetary ruler by sign, and you look at the planetary ruler by house. Both bring valid information to how evolutionary astrology does chart interpretations. All right, so I'm keeping aware of the time. Medium Monk is the, I could hear you typing a little bit. Is there any questions that I need to consider at the tail end here, or are we? I hope this has been helpful for everybody. I just wanted some overview of some of these aspects coming up through this week. Gives you a little information on why I had wanted to do an EA event with all of this going on and
Well,
live through it.
yes, and survive it. Yeah, we're doing
And
good on
survive
that
it.
with our composite south node in Taurus. So, no, there's no questions open on the board right now, Kim, other than you've heard me kind of typing in the background some personal responses to non-subject
Sure.
matter, so you're clear.
Sure. Sure. So just once again, here's the housekeeping. I just want, for anybody who's new, you can go check out these different sections of our Astro Library and all the information that is in there. Again, Section 1, 200 hours. Section 2, Section 3, 100 hours each. A wealth of information and a very reasonable price. And then, of course, here is our multimedia segment, and I will be starting a new class series starting January for anybody who's purchased segment 2, and we'll take this webinar format and start learning relationship and family astrology with the beauty of having this visual energy to work with. And so I thank you all very much for tuning in to this first webinar. I will say one other thing. Leroy will be working as much as he can to get each of these webinars uploaded to their permanent links as fast as possible. He's going to have to be working in the evenings to do it. I'm going to guess by the time we get to the second half of the week, it might be a struggle for him to keep up with it and have his computer keep up with everything. So again, we'll be uploading these links as fast as we can. We thank you for your patience with it. I thank you for listening to my first presentation, and I hope you look forward to a great cornucopia. Ah, I did it. Of lectures and presentations.